And he never graduated from even middle school because his parents were sick, and he was the oldest boy, and they had 9 brothers and sisters, and he went and he worked down in those mines when he was really young. And back then it was super dangerous. My grandma, they would all run to the mines every time a siren would go off because they didn't know who had died. Was it their husband? Was it their son? Was it their brother? And you know what made those mines safer, just so you know? Unions. Yeah. Unions made those mines safer. The reason that my grandpa got to eventually, after he helped and brought back the youngest kid who'd been taken to an orphanage, his youngest sister brought her back, brought her a car, got her in Duluth. He was able to save money in a coffee can to send my dad to a 2-year community college. And I know you have a community college, I've actually been there before, right here, right near here in Truckee. And that community college for my dad was his lifeline. He got that 2-year degree, and he ended up then graduating from the University of Minnesota with a 4-year degree, and then he became a journalist for his whole life. He covered sports, he covered the Vikings, he wrote a book for anyone that is a sports fan that is sadly still relevant today in the early 80s called Will the Vikings Ever Win the Super Bowl? Sadly. So right, that is, you are a historian of sports. The Lakers were originally from Minneapolis and Minnesota. That is why they were called the Lakers. And then they moved. They kind of took a turn. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, we'll talk about sports later. We'll continue on my life story, which is equally exciting. So, my grandma and grandpa, they were actually immigrants themselves, both of them, came from Switzerland. My grandpa was stopped at Ellis Island and found a way. They had a quota on Swiss immigrants, don't even ask. And he found some way to get through Canada and lived as a legal alien for years and years and years. It's a true story. Why are you guys laughing? It's so weird. Yeah, but it does show you right now as we think about immigration reform, I'm not sure he would have ever become a citizen today, because he made that up so he could get there. He said he was going to Canada and he stayed there for 1 week. And then he came through Michigan and he met my grandma and the whole, then that's where the whole story goes. Anyway, so what happens is my mom decides she wants to be a teacher. They have no money. She moves to Minnesota. She teaches 2nd grade until she was 70 years old. As a daughter of a teacher and a newspaper man, as the first woman elected to the U.S. Senate from the state of Minnesota, and a candidate for president of the United And that is because we live in a country of shared dreams. That no matter where you come from, or who you know, or the color of your skin, or where you worship, or who you love, that you can make it in this country. And so when I think of me on the debate stage with Donald Trump, I think about a few things. Well, I think of a lot of things, but I think about the fact that he's, you know, I'm going to be able to say to him, the Midwest, remember our blue wall area there? The Midwest is not flyover country to me. I live there. And I'm going to be able to say the people, with how he's run up the debt and then taken money and put it to the top, the people and the workers that you're treating, like, this is a good Reno analogy, like poker chips in one of your bankrupt casinos. Those people aren't poker chips to me. They are my friends and neighbors. And then I'm going to be able to say, you know, you got $413 million over the course of your life from your dad and your family. I can tell you this, they cannot fit $413 million in a coffee can in the basement. And so that's going to be a very interesting discussion, because the way I look at the world, if you are given opportunity by anyone, whether it be a parent or a grandparent, whether it be a neighbor or whether it be someone you work with, or a teacher, you go into the world not with a sense of entitlement. You go into the world with a sense of obligation, an obligation to lift people up. To bring people with you instead of pushing them away. So that is what I think is fundamental when you think of a lot of people out there that maybe voted for him or stayed home, that there's a lot of unmet promises from this president. And that gets to what we really need to run on here, and that's an optimistic economic agenda for the people of this country. And I think of a few things. One, and I'll start with this, just because it's such an important issue here in this area. You cannot really raise a family and be able to function and send your kids to school if you don't have a roof over your head. So housing issues, when 1 in 5 people in this state are having trouble with housing issues are a big thing. Affordable housing, right? Making sure that you have places for seniors to live. And some of this sometimes senior housing, and then that frees up other housing stock, and making sure that we have incentives for building housing, and that we make it easier for people to afford housing. And I have one of the most extensive housing plans out there, just because in my other job, when I was in county office, I was able to see how important that is to so many other things, and how you literally can trace back to people that have a hard time getting a start in life if they don't have a place to live. So I start with that as we look at some of the things that people are going to need if we're going to have this economic agenda that works for everyone. Another thing is affordable health care. If you haven't noticed, we're having a bit of a debate about that. I just look at this practically. I look at the fact that the Affordable Care Act, which of course was Barack Obama's signature legislation, that bill, when it first passed, it wasn't that popular, right? I remember. I was part of getting it done. And then what I realized over time is people realized the good things. They knew there were still problems, but when they realized the good things about it, like the pre-existing condition protections and keeping your kids on the insurance, pretty soon, slowly but surely, and let's look at this practically about why I don't want to blow it up and start over, the Affordable Care Act is now nearly 10 points more popular than the guy in the White House right now. Okay? Move to blow this up. I remember being in a small town parade and a woman came up and she had a stroller and her kid was in there, this little toddler. She says this is at the height of when they were trying to repeal it, the Republicans. She says, this is my son. He has Down syndrome and I will do anything to fight to keep his health care. And then she pauses and says, this is what a pre-existing condition looks like. We did that together, actually. We did that so that when this mother who will fight for her kid, when she was looking at something to hold on to keep his health care, we made that political argument. Because those words, pre-existing conditions, just don't flip off people's tongues, right? But we made that argument. So that's what I'm talking about with health care. We have reached a point where we know what we need to do now. We need to bring down premiums. And I think the best way to do that is with a non-profit public option to compete with the insurance company. To me, that is preferable than kicking 149 million people off their current health insurance in 4 years. Number two, we need to take on the pharmaceutical companies. They literally think they own Washington. Well, they don't own me. And I looked at some of the questions because we got so many people, we're not going to get all of them, sort of too big for this town hall meeting. But I looked at a bunch of the questions back there, and there were a number of them about pharmaceutical prices. So let me take that on. What we need to do here is, first of all, just so you know why it's bad, there are 2 lobbyists for every member of Congress. There are 2 lobbyists for every member of Congress. They literally think they own Washington, and they probably do, but they do not own me. They do not own me. And from the very beginning, I looked at this and thought, this is what they did. They literally went in, this is before my time, they got written into law a provision that said that Medicare is not allowed to negotiate cheaper prices for seniors, 45 million people under Medicare. Medicaid can, the VA can, but Medicare cannot. And that's when I drafted a bill, and I've led it. Now I have over 30 senators on it. As president, I can get that done to erase that provision from law. We should be able to bring in less expensive, safe drugs from other countries. In Minnesota, we can see Canada from our porch. So I've been able to see those cheaper drugs. That's why I lead a bipartisan bill. It used to be with Senator McCain, who I miss very much, now with Senator Grassley, to allow those drugs to come in. Bernie and I did an amendment together at midnight once. We got 14 Republican votes. I think they were tired, I don't know, but we did. That did the same thing. So we can actually get this done, and a president can do this herself. I found, maybe you have seen our ad, but I have found 137 things a president can do herself that are legal without Congress, and that is one of them. So, what else? Put a cap on drug prices. That would be a good thing. And that would bring in $350 billion. There was a question I saw on the deficit. Well, here's one thing we could do. You literally save $350 billion by putting a cap that's tied to the international rates for drugs. $350 billion in 10 years. That's the kind of money that we're talking about. All right, and I have other deficit proposals too, because I actually think it's something we have to talk about. Next, thank you, one person who asked the question. Next, the other things that we should build on, mental health and opioids. And in general addiction. And I have a plan, I show I'm going to pay for it with that big settlement we're going to get in from those opioid companies, and I think that money, of course, should be going right to people for treatment and their families, particularly in areas that have been hard hit, like in Nevada. And I also think that some of that money can go to other forms of addiction, because we know they're still out there, as well as mental health. When 1 in 5 Americans struggle with mental health, and we got to take the stigma off of that and make sure people get the treatment that they deserve. For me, this plan is personal. My dad, when I was growing up, struggled with alcoholism. By the time my husband and I got married, my dad got his 3rd DWI. And the judge then looked at him and he said, you got to choose treatment or jail. And he chose treatment. And in his words, he was pursued by grace because of that treatment and his faith and his family, his friends. He has now been sober. He is now 91 years old. He is in assisted living, and his AA group still visits him there. And in his words, about a year and a half ago, it's hard to get a drink around here anyway. So that's my dad. And then that leads to actually something else that we need to work on, which is long-term care, which is like the elephant that doesn't even fit in this room, because we're seeing a doubling of our senior population. Also, it helps people with disabilities. And so here's the deal. 1, keep Social Security strong. 2, keep Medicaid strong. But the third thing is finding innovative ways to make it so people can stay in their homes and get long-term care, which saves money. In my dad's case, he actually got long-term care insurance. I have no idea why. A few years ago, that's going to keep him at this place he loves with 15 other people for about a year and a half more. I know exactly the month it ends. Then after that, we go into his savings. He doesn't have as much as he should because he got married 3 times, but we're not going to talk about that on Valentine's Day. Not really appropriate. And then you go to Medicaid. And then he can't stay where he is now because Medicaid doesn't pay for that. And so then his Catholic elder care told me that they would take him in. So that's his story, and his story is actually better than so many other families that didn't get that long-term care insurance. That's why I found a way, one, to create some easy payment reductions for getting long-term care insurance for people that want to do it. And secondly, just making it easier and more cost-effective with caregivers tax credit, with help for people for staying in their home, because it's actually so much cheaper for all of us if people are able to stay in their home. So we need to make that a priority. That is tied to this, and there was a question about community college. The next thing that's tied to this is connecting our economy with our education system. And I cannot tell you how important that is, because I know it's easy to have these bumper sticker solutions, like free college for all. I know it sounds really appealing. But if you step back and really look at it, it takes a little longer to explain what's going to work here. Because what we don't want to do is use hard-earned taxpayer money to send wealthy kids to college. I don't think that's the best use of our money. Instead, I step back and I look at our economy, okay? We are going to have over 1 million openings for home health care workers. And I would rather use some of that money for jobs like that aren't as well paying, to make sure we've got child care for those workers and retirement and those kinds of things, so they actually take those jobs, because we don't know how we're going to fill those jobs, and a lot of people are going to need long-term care workers because we're going to have this aging of our population. We're going to have over 100,000 openings for nursing assistants. Those are 1- and 2-year degrees. Those should be free in my mind, the community college degrees. Those are the fastest, not just nursing. All those 1- and 2-year degrees are the fastest growing jobs right now in our country. We are going to have over 70,000 openings for electricians that we don't know how to fill. And you have got great trades here in the state of Nevada, and you know what I'm talking about. We need apprenticeships, we need good union jobs. We know we're going to have these jobs. We are going to have, get this, we are not going to have a shortage of sports marketing degrees. Now I know someone has one, your kid is getting one, okay, I know. We are not going to have a shortage of sports marketing degrees. We are going to have a shortage of plumbers. And so as we look at this, we need to fit that education system to our economy. To me, that means investment in K through 12, big time. That means those 1- and 2-year degrees I just mentioned, and then for college, we're going to have tons of openings for 4-year degrees. So what I think you do there is you double the Pell Grants from $6,000 to $12,000 a year. That would make a huge difference. And then you double the income level, so they get up to $100,000 per family. If you have that income level, you can still get the Pell Grant for your kids. That would allow the money to go where it should, to help the people that it should. And so that is my argument when it comes to education. How would I pay for it? I would take the capital gains tax rate, a lot of people have talked about this for a long time, bring it closer to the personal income tax rate. I love this guy. Thank you, guy in the blue shirt. Thank you. And then you would still have, of course, incentives for long-term investments. But that way, that brings in, you know, that over $500 billion. So to me, I know this whole thing I just told you doesn't fit on a bumper sticker, but it is the best way to do this. And it's actually not a pipe dream, it's a plan with deadlines and with a way to pay for it. Next slide. Next challenge, climate change. And you know very well it's happening in Nevada. It's happening now, it's not happening. We see those fires that we saw, and probably the best example for me is in your neighbor in Northern California, that video of that dad driving away from paradise with the neighborhood burning behind him, with his little girl in the car, and the flames are lapping over the car, and you hear him singing to his daughter to calm her down. That minute of that video really tells it all. And you've seen, by the way, it's not just the rising sea levels, as we all know from being interior states. It's not just that. It's the weird weather events. It's the high temperatures. What are you pointing at? It's February. Okay, yes. It's what we are seeing right now. In the middle of the country, it's the flooding. where you have farmers not being able to plant, where you have rising homeowners insurance going up 50%. And so we need to make those arguments, not just the arguments of the rising sea levels, right? We need to make these other arguments for the people in our state. And so I'm uniquely qualified to do that. I'm only one of 2 candidates right now left that is from the middle of the country that's left standing on that debate stage. And I think it is really important to make those arguments. The way you do this, by the way, is resolutions. Day one, get back into the International Climate Change Agreement. Only country not in there now. Nicaragua and Syria weren't in it, and they got in it. Clean power rules, something that have been negotiated over many years through the Obama administration, and many of our power companies already believe they can make it. And of course, you are like the mecca here of solar energy, right? In the state of Nevada. You know the possibilities here for that. Number 3, the gas mileage standards. Something, even though the car companies were on board, this president pushed them back because of his affinity for the oil companies. We know that's what's going on. So those things a president can do herself without Congress. Then sweeping legislation to put a price on carbon and energy efficiency. Now let me just focus on that, because we're not going to be able to pass this in this state or in any other state in the country if we don't make this bill work for regular people. And if we don't take that, and it's going to be trillions of dollars coming in, that money doesn't go directly back to people to help them with their heating bills, to help them with their cooling bills, to help areas that are going to see, a lot of areas are going to see more jobs, right? Maybe some in this state, right? But then there are areas of the country going to see less jobs or a change in jobs, and we've got to make sure they transition to other jobs. And they don't always just have to be green energy jobs in my plan. They could be manufacturing jobs and the like. And I think about this when we think of the money that's going to come in, not just from my head, not just numbers, but from my heart. I told you my grandpa's story. Those mines up in northern Minnesota, they would open and close. The iron ore that makes steel, they're open right now because we did something on steel dumping. And that area in northern Minnesota went through good times and bad, just like areas